Why is it, right, that the average millennial can't afford anything close to whatever their parents had at the same age? Many say the boomers of today actually got the best deal in history. Public housing for the price of a car, stable secure jobs, and little to no debt. So what's this reason? The obvious answer, right, people would say is inflation. But far more has changed since the post-independence generation climbed the ladder. Because a dollar worth 50 years ago is worth a heck of a lot more than it is now. Everyone likes to talk about how inflation is out of control, but no one has offered any solutions. So if I were to propose one, I would just say, have you heard of this old Swedish myths of senicide, where they push the elderly off a cliff? Well, I'm not saying we're gonna do that, but maybe then the generational wealth will actually start trickling down, and we'll finally get that biggest wealth transfer in history, right? But right now, all the boomers are just hoarding their cash, sipping their margaritas, sitting on their cruise lines. Yeah, and chastise us for not saving enough, eating our avocado toast, buying our Starbucks and bubble tea. Here's what almost nobody talks about, that generation's wealth won't just simply retire, because it still controls most of the region's property, and they vote as a bloc. And this shapes government policy against almost any change that threatens their own asset value. It means that because the boomers are in control still, they're gonna control the politics. If they're gonna control the politics and government, they're gonna control policies that will affect their own asset values, right? So to me at least, boomers have been the most selfish generation in history. And there are actually many articles to support this. So in this video, I'll explain whether one generation rigged the system for everyone who came after, or whether younger people should just accept the rules and keep grinding. So I think it's pretty clear to everyone that each generation had its own challenges. But what's become a little bit more clear to me is that there's a growing disconnect. While boomers are telling us that we are a soft strawberry generation, Gen Z also thinks that boomers' life was just sunshine and rainbows. In fact, the clear sign of this divide is how 70% of millennials today say that they are pro-socialist. What does this mean if you're not into politics? It means we want social ownership or control of the means of production. We want greater equality, greater shared resources, and collective welfare rather than private profit. Because most times people are capitalists, right? They want to make money. They want there to be meritocracy. If I work hard, I get money in return. But since that we have no access to it and our money is being devalued, what's the point? We're not holding any assets. We would rather have a bit of a communist or socialist kind of perspective. So to find out why, I'm going to take a nostalgic ride back in history to find out how life really was like for both parties, Gen Zs and boomers, across education, work, and retirement. To do that, we need to go back to 1955. You're a boomer born right after your country's independence. Your father is a mid-level civil servant or engineer just with a high school cert. Yet one salary then could feed a family of 7, buy a public flat or even a small landed property, and you'll still have some money left. School was affordable at just a few $100s a year. If you want to consider for today's inflation, that's about $4,000 to $7,000. You're able to work part-time during school holidays and actually graduate with zero debt. By 25, you're married, buy your first flat for 3 to 4 times your annual salary, and the monthly repayment is under 20% of take-home pay. Compare that to the average fresh grad today, unemployed, in heavy 5-figure debts or even 6-figure debts, okay? With a degree that is no longer competitive. And even if you did get a job, real entry-level wages have barely budged since 2010, while the price of the same flat or condo has multiplied 5 to 10 times. We're basically fucking cooked. So now the real question begins. Will this eventual handover from boomers to younger generations really lead to a healthier society or break it completely? And the best way to answer that is by looking at it through a spectrum. But here's what I want to find out. Was it much easier for boomers to get rich, or are we just making excuses? And the best place to start is with education. Because we all know by this point how expensive universities have become, and how the degree has also become more worthless. But this doesn't happen by accident. As boomers became taxpayers and political leaders in the 80s and 90s, they started cutting government funding for universities. This narrative then shifted from viewing college as a public good to a private investment, something that you should pay for yourself rather than the state pay for you. And the big reason was universities operating more like a business rather than for education. So the federal government, right, they slowly replaced grants that gave students money for college and instead started lending it with interest. That's also why we see so many people with worthless degrees, high student loan debts, even before they make a single dollar. And the result was a money-making feedback loop. Because more loans meant higher tuition, which required more loans, which led to even higher tuition. So the younger generation today not only enter college with a paywall and graduate with a heavy debt trap that's now more than all credit card debt combined, but they're also starting at a different starting point. Today's youth are starting at like a negative 100k. It's just that much harder to build wealth when you're starting not just from the floor but in a hole. In fact, it explains in part a lot of effects from declining birth rates, family formation, and especially home ownership these days. And it's something that you really can't blame boomers for because they took advantage when prices were low, right? And they didn't have control of policies then. But you can absolutely blame them for the policies that they are allowing these days. You can blame them for the nimbism or the not in my backyard activism that they engage in today. What this means is that they're the ones showing up to fight against people trying to build more housing. They're the ones trying to fight people who says that their assets are that high. They think that they deserve it. In the 1960s or 70s, we actually built like 20 to 25k new public units in Singapore, per year for every 2 million people. Today, with double that population, right, or triple that population at 6 million, we barely hit that number. We are around 15,000 new units per year. Why? Because our boomer parents and homeowners, they don't want prices to go down. Because obviously they want to sell it as high as possible, right? And since they were early buyers before all this QE and money printing, which didn't just happen in Singapore, it happened globally. They could lock in like dirt cheap prices on their houses with low property tax, low rates. While if you're a new buyer today, you just have to accept the valuation it is today. As a result, the millennials and Gen Zs of today will have to pay sky-high rents just to subsidize someone else's retirement, right? We are not even owning the flat, we're just paying to exist. And then get told we need to start saving more to afford a flat. So when boomers, right, they say, just work harder. I think they're just ignoring like this whole game that they rigged. Wealth is only half the story, because money can buy influence, but you need political power to guarantee it. And real power comes from capturing and controlling this entire political system. So how did boomers make it so everything goes their way and nothing ever changes? Because you may not know this, but boomers are the highest representation in elections. The over 60 group actually turns out 20 to 30% higher than under 35s in every election across Asia, from Jakarta to Bangkok to Singapore, right? And part of this could be users really just giving up. Maybe we're too busy trying to make ends meet, too busy working. But how do politicians see this, right? They just see it as raw numbers, If they're not showing up, then I don't have to cater to them. This means that budget surpluses become pioneer packages, and medical top-ups are just now catered to the elderly rather than for youth. Very little is actually being done for them. Sure, there are some younger leaders that can make noise, but it's very difficult when we make an increasingly smaller and smaller voting population. And it doesn't help, right, that when we give up, this turnout drops and this influence shrinks even further. The good news about this is that other Southeast Asian countries are actually fighting back. Because if you ever heard of this term called Gen Z protests, because that's what's happening in a lot of Asian countries, including Nepal, Indonesia, Philippines, Timor-Leste, and the Maldives. Basically, we pour so we riot. So what is the solution here, right? The most important question becomes, will our generation rebuild what boomers broke, or will we repeat the same mistake? Because when the great equalizer of mortality comes for them, right, and the money really finally trickles down, will we choose to be selfish to the next generation? The truth is, every generation thinks that they're different, but we all follow the same cycle and psychology. My take is probably not, because there isn't a next generation. At least for our generation, right, we're voting with our penises and uteruses. We're just not giving birth. We're not raising new sheep for the farm. We're just really burning the pasture and walking away. So in that case, there's just no new generation to worry about. And maybe that's the real FU money. Maybe that's the only way we can revolt, because we can't really do anything about it. As always, if you want to learn more about financial markets or economics, do check out our website for our free economics newsletter. We also have academic courses. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.